The world of cybersecurity is absolutely growing and going crazy. The world has changed dramatically over the last couple of years, and it can be a little bit of a scary thing, but it doesn't have to be if you have the right people in place. So today I am joined by Dr. Schippers, and we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, what we're doing here at Walsh to kind of prep our students for that, and kind of what the state of the industry is and how we're getting everybody ready. So Dave, I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do here at the college, and then we'll dive in.
Wow, I'll say, where do I start with what I do, at the college? So short version is, my name is Dr. Dave Schippers. I'm the Chief Academic Officer. I have had a heavy hand, and I still teach in the cybersecurity classes. They are, I'll say, for better or for worse. I tend to say for much, much better. They are my brainchild with some other key people. So we've had a number of different advisory board members as well as faculty who've had a heavy hand in helping make sure our cyber program is exceptionally strong. So my background, particularly before I moved into higher ed, I'll say I like to say I am not a typical academic. I like to get that out there. In that, so I worked in industry. I'll say it's Dave Schippers version 3.0 is what I would say. Maybe 3.5 now, I think. But realistically, so I actually had a business career going, and then I shifted from business into IT and cyber. Kind of got, that world sucked me in, is what I would say. As much as I tried to deny my technical capabilities, I finally gave in and went, hey, I'm good at this, and I'm going to jump in and do this. And then went full on IT, ended up running a pretty large enterprise, 25 sites, well over 100, I think it was approaching 200 servers, and we were running the IT and cyber teams to keep that running. And I'll say we had some fun times, all sarcasm intended. We had things like, I'll say we had cyber attacks coming in out of Russian IPs, and this is years ago. And trust me, when Russian cyber attacks start knocking on your door, they don't stop in 5 minutes. That goes on for not hours or days, but weeks and sometimes months. Yeah. So that's some of my background. So have lived some not so fun events. We've had incident response where we've had full on data center shutdowns sporadically, and you got to recover from that
quickly.
So, rather quickly. So I've seen I'll say the short version is I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly to try to get that plug in there. So,
for sure.
But yeah, so that's a little bit about my background. And then obviously at some point when I was in the cyber field, I'll say one of the key areas that I actually gravitated to a lot, I don't get to do as much of it lately, but one of the things I gravitated to was within the cyber discipline, specifically things like digital forensics. That ended up driving me out I was doing digital forensic investigations, and then I actually still hold my professional investigator's license with the state of Michigan under that digital forensics component. But that actually also included open source intelligence. Okay. So I've done some different things in that. I'll say I tend to call it private intelligence work. That's kind of how I would like to phrase that. So I have a very interesting view on, how data can be used, how it can be exploited, and also try to help people defend against that.
Well, and in many ways, that background actually has set up perfectly for coming into higher education. Because we started off as a business school, and we've really grown this technology arm of it so strong. The ability to bring in both aspects of that into your current role allows for us to have those two colleges speak to each other in a way that's going to better prepare the students. Yeah,
that's a really good point. The interesting thing is that, kind of the business domain tends to see itself in a pure way. And then technology has traditionally always seen itself in this, kind of pillar.
Right.
And unfortunately, the world has changed tremendously. And it's not just like within the last year or two. It's been happening for quite a while. What we have traditionally thought as pure pillars are now the expectation is you have hybrid talents. You can't just have business. You have to have have business with some tech, or you have to have tech with some business capabilities. So
and everything has a business element to it.
Exactly. That's the other thing. And we can't run business anymore without tech. Kind of thing. So it's an ecosystem. I like to use that phrase. It's an ecosystem
really is,
now.
though.
And you can't, it's very hard to say, well, I'm going to pull this particular thread out and then everything's going to be okay. No, it's not.
Right.
Everything's just too tightly bound and interconnected.
Right. Absolutely. Well, so that kind of leads me into the next piece. So as you are overseeing the college now, and you oversee you're the dean of academics, you're the curriculum. A lot of it has come from on the minds of business professionals, on tech professionals, and really people coming out of the industry to build a curriculum that is designed around the working professional. So in that case, and as cyber is growing as rapidly as it is, and cybersecurity is massively important to anybody, and getting them to understand the importance of it is a whole nother monster, I'm sure. Yeah. But why do you feel it's so important for Walsh to be teaching that next generation of cybersecurity professional?
I'll say it's going to get deep fast.
I like it. Bring
it. I'm going to say this. This is the one primary thing that I like to talk about in our program is designed around this. And that is this. Cyber is not just about protecting your data anymore. It's just not. It's about enabling your business to function. All right. Now we're talking in general. A lot of people are like, hey, in my career, how does this play out? Now I want to pull out a little bit more. When we talk about let's train the next generation, what does that mean? We're not just training business and technology professionals anymore in the context of cybersecurity. Okay, where I'm going with this is you have to realize that we have industrial control systems, we have SCADA, we have all these other systems in every component of our daily lives, and I would argue our entire society, whether we like it or not, we're not far from Skynet, but in essence, our way of life is integrably linked with technology. And so when we say we're going to teach cybersecurity, we're not just protecting data anymore. We're protecting the pacemaker that your grandmother has in her heart to keep her functioning. Okay? It's the medical equipment. It's the power grid. It's the ability for the streetlights to function. So when I make statements like, we are helping protect, depending upon what you do in cyber, you have an impact on enabling our way of life as a society. So I told you I was going to get deep.
Yeah, no.
But to me, I'll say, knowing what I know, that is one of the things that if I were to look out into the camera and say, here's what you need to really understand about cyber. Cyber can be just about the data on your computer, but it can also be about the ability to flip the light switch and have your day function correctly.
Right.
It is to that level now. Right. And that's where I think there's a lot of disconnects. And so if there's any mission, that I can get charged up for and say, hey, why do I still teach? Why am I still, with all the things that I'm doing, why am I still spending time in the classroom trying to make sure that people learn what they need to learn? It's because, you know what? I don't know who within that classroom is going to land that job that helps make sure that the lights can turn on, that we can still drive those cars, that we can still use all of the daily necessities that we count on. And I think sometimes we just take for granted.
That's absolutely
okay. That is where cyber is at today. And I'll say, not to be like overly romantic, but that is literally in many cases what we are protecting. Mm-hmm. All right. So when we say, hey, why do we, that's why I get up, right, eat my Wheaties every day and say, this is why I want to teach in cyber. We're not always teaching like, hey, not every single class is about, industrial control systems, right, or controlling the power grid and protecting it, but you have to build up to those concepts and all those things.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I to expand even a little bit further on what you said is, what we're doing is we are not training these students for what the industry is doing today. We have to make sure that they are prepared and resourceful enough to know that in 20 years from now, that person that we trained 20 years prior still has the skills and all the necessity to protect the power grid and to protect those things. In a not fun, a terrifying game to play is give yourself 3 minutes to think about what happens if globally the internet goes out. I mean, we wouldn't function. We wouldn't be able to function. And so when you talk about cybersecurity in a way of let's level up these students to get them to a point where they're not only walking out of college with the capability to do these tasks, but how do we make sure that they walk out of here with the knowledge and the confidence to know that in 20 years, I'm still going to be able to keep up with the industry trends?
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's definitely integrated into the program. So part of what, when we work with advisory boards and we're saying, hey, what are the skills? What are the things that you need? There's always a common thread. Mm-hmm. We can sit down and go, oh, well, we need Python today, or we need this, or we need this database, or, okay, this particular program is the rage, and the skill sets are needed right now. That's great. Those are going to change. We keep up with that, and that's awesome. I would say there's still core competencies. There's root cause analysis, problem solving. I can tell you right now, I've had many situations. So I'll say, sometimes I'll say I'll pick on students a little bit. Sometimes they tend to think, well, I can just Google everything. Well, what happens when the internet's down? Or what happens when the cyber attack took out your internet access?
Right.
And it's gone.
Yeah.
You can't Google anything. So if you don't have the skills to just get, core things running again, you're basically, you just hit a wall.
Right.
If
it's your job to protect the internet and the internet goes out,
and it's out, and it's like, oh,
you don't have the skills to do it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You're toast.
Yeah.
You're out of business.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've had people, when things are down, when you have so let's say you got a data center down. Ours wasn't a cyber attack. We had a power issue with cooling, and it took out the entire data center on us. Right. So that's a different thing. And then guess what? I couldn't Google. Everything was down. It was like I have to know the sequence and how to get everything running again. So I had to do it. But people are on edge. When people can't do work, if you think people are impatient, take out their internet and we get 15 minutes in and you got a multi-million-dollar operation that nobody can do their work, people get hot. I mean, they really do, because you're burning money. Fast. So you have to be able to respond. You have to be able to think under pressure. You have to be able to respond with grace and still keep your head clear. And so that's one of the things that I'll say. I don't know that everybody who chooses cyber, in IT in general, but specifically cyber, I don't know that everybody understands when you get into the incident response game, the amount of stress and resilience that you have to be able to navigate those situations. So I will say this, some of the worst and the best memories are those events, because they were incredibly hard. They were incredibly difficult. But at the same time, the people that I worked with got to show me who they really were, and who I really was, I showed them. And so in those moments, I'll say in your career, as much as you kind of sit back and go, God, that really sucked. At the same time, when you get to work with other really good professionals who respond in kind, and you rally and bring things back together and get things running again, there's a lot of satisfaction in that. And then, like I said, when it's over, you're glad, but then you usually, down the road, you're going to have jokes in the break room, and you're going to be joking, hey, remember when that happened? And remember
brings you closer together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You build bonds through
Absolutely.
that. So that's as much as those things can be like, oh my God, that's hard. It is. Yeah, it is. But at the same time, you're building incredible experiences with other professionals. So.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting perspective on that. And a lot of people a lot of people would look at, military stuff. Military people are very close together because you're bonded by trauma. And in the IT world, if a multi-million-dollar company goes down and you're the three people in charge of bringing it back up, you're gonna probably tell that story 10 years from now and be bonded by it.
Well, it's interesting. I'll say, to jump on that, it's interesting. So a lot of our adjuncts and a lot of our students are actually veterans. We get a lot of folks that they come out of that atmosphere, they've built those bonds, and they gravitate to this industry. Because there's a lot of, I'll say the mindset is somewhat similar. You go into this protective mindset, you're looking for dangers, you're looking for threats, you're trying to figure out how to mitigate them. And then, that level of camaraderie, I'm not a vet, so I can't speak to that level of it. I will say, in the bonds and things that I've built with the veterans that I've worked with, it seems like they really gravitate to the industry because they get to somewhat, I'll say, replicate some of those experiences that they had from the military. They get to bring in that and get to relive some of that, obviously without gunfire, right?
Yes,
so
that's
the plus side there.
From a distance. So, all right. So let's get in a little bit to how Walsh is different. So obviously we are not the only school that offers a cybersecurity degree.
Yeah.
But we all here, at least, believe strongly that we're the best. So why is that? Why is it that Walsh is different than the next one down the street?
Yeah, I'm gonna zero in on what I believe is the philosophy that keeps us on edge and keeps us focused in the right direction. Okay, so and that is this. So I will jump back to my days when I was in industry. I was hiring college grads out of programs. And when we would bring them in, it was pretty apparent to me, they're great people. We interviewed them. We liked them. We obviously hired them. But there was a long transition time. It was pretty clear to me. when I was hiring college grads that they were getting mostly theory, in some cases always theory with no real hands-on. So then when I moved into academia and was like, okay, we're going to revamp this program. We're going to make sure it meets the bill and the needs of what hiring supervisors and organizations need. The guiding light or the vision or the strategy on that was build graduates with skills and competencies that you would hire. That sounds simple, right? But it's not easy to deliver.
I'm sure.
I will say that. So that is, we teach you theory, but we also do a lot, and I mean a lot of hands-on. I'm not going to name names because I'll say, well, I could, but I'm not. I'm not going to name names. We have people that apply and come to us. They have gotten cybersecurity bachelor's degrees from other institutions who then choose to come to Walsh for their master's, and they have openly said, in my cybersecurity degree, I never got any hands-on. I'm coming to Walsh to learn skills so I can land a job. Okay, so to me, when people are saying, well, why is Walsh different and why is Walsh the best? We'll teach you the theory you're getting from everybody else. And then we're going to back that up and help you learn the actual hands-on skills that you need to be able to do the job when you get on site. Okay, so now are we going to show you absolutely 100% of everything that you need when you get to an organization? No, you're not. That's not possible.
Have the time for that.
Yeah, we don't have the time for that. Right, but we're going to get you with all the core competencies and skills, so that transition time is super short.
Right.
So I don't personally think it's acceptable that if you're a graduate of any technical or cybersecurity program, if it takes a year to two to transition you,
right,
that's just not acceptable. In my opinion, you didn't get your money's worth.
Right.
You need to be able to show up. There's going to be some orientation. To me, it's like within 90 days, you should be running pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then from there, mentoring takes over, and then you start to learn more about the individual aspects of that organization. But if I can channel that, hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely.
But that is now with that, keep in mind, I've talked about advisory boards a couple times. So we're meeting with them yearly. We literally say, here's the curriculum. Here's what we're teaching. Here's the competencies and skills and learning outcomes. What are we missing? Yeah. We point blank ask them, and these are CISOs, these are CIOs, these are CTOs, and they're saying, yeah, this stuff looks great. Here's the new trends. Here's what we'd recommend you change and all that stuff. So we work hard to try to make sure we stay on top of that game.
For sure. Now, you mentioned some of the real world hands-on stuff.
Yeah.
What's some of the stuff that's taking place in the classroom that is that hands-on stuff?
Yeah, I'll say interestingly, I'll give you a couple examples. So like last night, I was teaching a red team cyber, so attack class. So we teach, people are like, why are you teaching people to attack? The reason is we teach people to attack is because then you can become a better defender. When you understand what can be done to you, I'll say you certainly realize like how serious you need to take this, right? So one of the things we're going through, and I had a student last night in class asking, hey, I'm trying to run this and I'm having some troubles with the lab. So we're talking through it. So that particular lab was how to set up a phishing email, okay? Mm-hmm. How to set up a payload, and so that you can deliver that and then commandeer and take over a box. That's what it's about. So we actually walk them through that. We do that on Cali. So in that particular class, we spend a ton of time in Cali Linux. So, which again, depending on programs, some people never touch Cali, right, and they never touch Linux. But so that's one example. Mm-hmm. That class is going to culminate. It actually starts. So they have a 2-week final project where we set up live targets. All they do is get an IP number. So it's kind of like a telephone number on your phone. They get their IP number, and I say, here's 5 IPs. Your team has 2 nights to scan those IPs and breach those IPs. And you have to I'm giving you nothing other than the IP number. So at the culmination of the class, they should be able to assess those targets and figure out how are they going to breach and get in. And I tell them, there is a way in on all 5. You have to find it. And it's interesting. So of course, we have varying degrees of success. Most of them do exceptionally well by the time we get done with that particular class. But it's fun. You don't get to do hands-on. It's remote somewhere.
Right.
Out in our virtual environment, and you have to try to breach it. So, right. And then once they breach, they're like, yay.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, this is awesome. I got it. Some of them fall in love with breaching, and then they want to be red team rock stars and all this stuff. And hey, that's great. That's cool. Then I'll jump over to the class they do after that. I kind of use these 2 classes as the hallmark examples of kind of what we do and how we prepare. So we have a class called IT 422. I'll say this class has been a brainchild of mine for a while, but I'll say some people are like, "Oh, Skippers, you really run us through the mill here." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you're going to know what the job is by the time this is done." So we put them on teams. We run simulated environments, and they're given, virtual enterprise assets. So they have to get in, they have to assess it, they have to clean it up, they have to set it up like an enterprise, try to secure it, and then they have I'll say the time decreases over the class because we amp it up.
Right.
But then they go into a timed event where there's multiple teams, and then they have to breach and attack each other and defend. So it's all, I call it a live fire exercise.
Yeah.
So in essence, and then we have what I'll say, sometimes I bring in what is known as rogue reds. So rogue reds are usually, I'll say, they're alumni who like to come back and have fun. And they'll come in, and then their whole job in that particular event is to just create havoc. So they'll come in and and keep in mind, some of these people are on the job. They're getting to be seasoned professionals.
Right.
And then they come back and they just hammer you.
That's great. But that's what's happening in the real world.
Unfortunately, everybody, like at the beginning of the class, everybody's like, "Oh my God," they start to freak out. I'm like, "Listen, have fun."
Right.
Have fun with it, because you're going to grow you'll learn more if you're having fun. So get the right attitude. But the other piece with that class is all of the other cyber courses. We have a series of courses. Everything culminates in that class. So I start that class off first night and I say, "Listen, what you're going to learn here is we're going to live fire exercise. I'm going to walk you through what that looks like, and we're going to give you the rules of engagement. But what's going to happen over the course of this 11 weeks for the semester is you are going to understand everything from a lab perspective and from a theory perspective that we have told you for the last year and a half to 2 years. Mm-hmm. You will be able to assemble, like, why do I use an active domain? Why am I making sure all the ports are closed on my firewall? Right. Why am I doing all of these things? Why am I initiating these policies? Why does that happen? Okay, so it's one thing, I'll say, I sat there and said, "Hey, we teach hands-on, and that helps cement it." It does. Mm-hmm. But even in the context of those labs, when you put it in a larger enterprise, like we try to mimic a workplace.
Right.
And then say, we have somebody who's supposed to operate as the team lead. They have a certain number of people on their team, and their choice is you have to decide how you're going to deploy your people to respond to the events. Now, in that, they're not also just attacking and defending against each other. I operate as a business leader, asking them to do upgrades, asking them to do other things as everything else is happening. So it is, in essence, that ecosystem of you have multiple things coming at you simultaneously, and you have to try to prioritize and react and still keep everything functional.
The controlled chaos that has to be taking place in that room. It's especially when you start mixing in the alumni who want to come in and have fun, right? But that also adds in that mentorship piece of it, because I would imagine that as much fun as they have just coming in and doing, trying to cause chaos, they probably also enjoy the engagement with those students, because like we talked about, there's a connection that takes place within the world of cyber, because these are people who operate in the same wavelength when it comes to ethical hacking and being able to attack and defend, and then know that what they're going into is going to be very real, and that this represents something that is going to be something that they're going to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say I've had alumni who come in, and they'll run them through the mill, okay, and then the following week we do a lessons learned. All right, so because this happens in the workplace all the time. After you have an engagement, what went right, what went wrong, and what would I do differently knowing what I know now, right? Always did this with my teams as a leader. That was always a focus. And then within that, if we've had rogue red, sometimes the rogue red's like, "Can I come in and talk to class?" And they come in during lessons learned. And I mean, and they don't, so sometimes this sounds, I'll say IT people and cyber people tend to be pretty direct. That's the nature of the business. So I've had someone go, do you know how I got you? Do you realize how I decimated you? And if they genuinely don't know, then and we tell them, like, if you don't know what you did, you need to figure out what you did wrong.
Right.
And we have to have this conversation. And then I've had them go, "Listen, this is what I did. You had this port open. You didn't close it. And because of that allowed me to run this exploit. And once I was in, then I just ran havoc.
Right. You opened a door for them.
Yeah. Once I got it, I was like, I'm going to take you out.
Yeah. And it may seem pretty extreme, but they're not going to learn otherwise. And the people who are coming in that are hacking not ethically are not going to sit back and go, well, I know they didn't mean to leave that open. They have to see that piece of it.
Yeah. The other thing, and I'll say I try to share it every semester that I can. It doesn't always happen. There is I don't even remember the episode. There was a Vice News. There was a cyber war. They had a series that they were running for a while. It was pretty cool. They got into the aspects. They did a very good job of covering the nuances and all this stuff. But one particular episode, the host actually called into a prison where there was, in essence, a hacker who had gotten convicted for breaching, and doing all this nefarious stuff. They basically broke laws. They were in for a while. And why do I bring this up? I bring this up because of the statement this person made on the phone, which I'll say anybody who's considering cyber needs to understand what your adversaries think of you. He openly said, anybody doing defensive cybersecurity for companies are stupid, they have no talent, and they deserve anything I do to them. They deserve it.
Man.
That's how, and right. I'm not saying that because I don't believe that. Those are not my words.
No, but it shows you who's out there that is doing these attacks.
Right. That's the mentality.
Right.
They don't care what they do to you. They don't care. They have their own motivations, and they are going to be ruthless, and they're going to do whatever they need to do to achieve their goals.
Right.
And clearly they're not staying within legal boundaries. Right. So, and when you tend to share that, say some of the students, especially our younger students who are, just getting into it and all this stuff, they get a little like, whoa, like a deer in the headlights. And it's like, listen, I'm not trying to scare you.
Right.
You can have if you genuinely love technology and you like to do cyber work, you can have a great career. Mm-hmm. It's not, every day is not going to be easy though. I'm going to just tell you that.
No, it's going to be a high stress world. For sure. Yeah. But also I think it's great that you share that because it's important for people to understand you're not dealing apples to apples. You may feel like you're a good person, but that person you're dealing with is not a good person. And you're not going in dealing with your neighbor in most cases. You're going in and dealing with somebody who is likely not even here. They're not even within a drivable radius of you. Yeah.
It's actually easier to commit a cybercrime now than it is a physical crime.
Man.
I mean, that's where we're at. So yeah, a lot of the times the cybercrimes, they may not be in the US, maybe.
Right.
And they're probably foreign somewhere. And once they're foreign, trying to get prosecution and stuff gets really sticky. It's just a whole nother level. And so, and even if they are US, they're going to bounce out with VPNs and cloak where they're coming from. I mean, all that stuff can be done, and then you got to try to backtrack it. So usually it depends. And the other side of the coin is, some people are like, we can call the FBI. The FBI will come help us. Well, I'm sorry. The FBI doesn't have enough people to do that. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, and the number of cyber attacks that take place on a daily basis, if they went to every single one of those calls, there's not enough people in the world to cover that. Yeah,
exactly. And if you don't have enough damages to meet the threshold, I'll say, I thought it was like 250,000. If your immediate damages are not looking at 250,000 or above, they probably won't even have time for you.
You're not even a blip on the radar.
You're not a blip. So
that's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. Well, so let's talk about some industry things really quick here, because I do think that having your expertise at our disposal here allows me to ask you a couple industry questions. So the growth of cyber attacks, the growth of cybersecurity has been astronomical over the last handful of years, and it seems to be growing even faster by the day. So with the trends that are happening in the growth of cybersecurity and the growth of cyber attacks, there's also the equal side of things that people are doing to defend it.
Sure.
So as we look at the industry, what are some interesting things going on in the industry right now that are just important for the common person to know?
From the common person perspective, I think one of the big things is you have to have, I'll say in general, I'll say ironically, I've been doing this for a long time. And I feel like I've been saying I'm a broken record, right? You know what I mean? You have to take cyber seriously and you have to position yourself. The one thing I would tell people who are not, so let's say we have people who are not really interested in cyber as far as career-wise, but they're like, hey, I want to check out what they have to say, all that stuff on this podcast. And so for the general business person, the number one way to think about cyber is risk. Okay. There's a technical piece, there's technical talent, there's all these things associated with it, right? That's what I help train. That's what I want to try to build. That's what I've built my career around and love to do. But all of the non-technical people, just regular business people, cyber is risk, right? So like we said before, what happens if your servers stop working? What happens if if your website goes down? And what happens if you can't take money in to do business or be able to pay your purchase orders and all this and your bills and all this other stuff? Well, you basically are going to shut down, right? So the short version is, in general, we need to understand cyber is a risk. It's just like supply chain risks and all these other things. You have to put it in your risk strategy and be able to deal with that appropriately. All right. So to me, I think that's probably the part of the reason that we see a lot of the cyber attacks that we have. Unfortunately, a lot of people have the, kind of the ostrich syndrome, which is, I'm just going to stick my head in the sand. It's not going to happen to me. Here's the bad news. The bad news is the United States gets the most ransomware and cyber attacks. Why? Because we pay the most.
Right.
It's very lucrative to attack U.S. companies and individuals, and the attackers know that.
Right.
All right. So that's why we are targeted, and that's going to continue. So in general, what I would say, the bad news on the trend is people still don't take cyber seriously. Now, one of the other things I would say is, there was some swatting episodes. I think like the White House got swatted. Yeah. There's all these other politicians that got swatted. What I had initially seen on that was, this is the level of what's happening with the trends. And that is this. So supposedly some kid out of Florida was offering those services on the dark net. Mm-hmm. I've done research on the dark net. There's people out there who are like, yeah, here's a list of stuff that I can do. Basically, all of it's illegal from a cyber perspective. I'm sure. You pay me this and I'll go do it. I mean, so we have to realize that in the last, I think it started in 2018, 2019, this whole shift, I think it was already shifting there, but it dramatically started to change. And that change was this. So we have the IT and cyber industry has all these vendors and service providers, right? And they all sort of develop their own niches, right? So a lot of the different companies are like, oh, I'm going to be a specialist in this, and I'm going to contract specifically in this, right? So that's the way. Yeah. Well, all the cyber bad guys started doing the same thing. What they're doing is like, there's groups that all they do, their whole speciality, as I'd like to say, is I just figure out how to breach you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to steal your data. Yeah. I'm not going to lock your data. I'm not going to do any of that. All I'm going to do is I'm really good at breaching your enterprise and getting access.
Now, if we can get everybody on the ethical side of that, it's great. Then we can get them to be like, here's what I did. Here's I got to go fix that.
Yeah. Here's what well, that's not happening.
It's not happening. So, no.
And then that group, what do? Once they breach you, they put up your access for sale on the darknet. And then the other people who actually are like, hey, my specialty is monetizing, exploiting you. That's what I do. So I'm not really good at breaching you, but gal, I know how to make money off you once I have access. Okay. So then we all know the ransomware trends that were happening, right? If I'll say it shouldn't be news. I know I've had articles I've published on it, so it shouldn't be super big news. So I'll say it in case it is for some. Ransomware has transitioned into doxware. So doxware, if you're unfamiliar with that, is really so in essence, I breach you, Jay, and then I it's locked and it says, if you want your files, you got to pay me. You got to give me like X number of Bitcoin, right?
Right.
And you're like, I'm not paying them. I got a backup. Right. And I'm going to flip to my backup, right? Or I'm going to do this, or I had this other defensive thing, and I can just avoid paying you. Great. Well, guess what? I'm mad. I want my cash. Right. I want my mega bucks. So then I turn around and tell you, listen, here's the deal. If you don't pay me anyway, I'm going to email all your customers. I have their data. So it's blackmail.
Oh yeah.
Okay. But they're calling it doxware. So that trend has been going up. The other thing too is let's realize you have nation states buying zero days, which are basically unknown vulnerabilities. I'll say the WannaCry example was I had a conversation with a student last night. WannaCry, in my opinion, based off the research that I've done, was originally an NSA exploit that they were using, for governmental use. Right. We're not gonna talk about what the government does. So we won't get into that. National security, all that. I got it. Unfortunately, I think that got pulled out it got stolen, and then it got sold off. And so in essence, the reason I bring that, and then shadow brokers picked it up. It got picked up by people who knew how to exploit it. And then they started ransomwaring everybody and all this stuff. So my example on that is we're in a world where if you're operating on the internet as a business or as an individual, we have nation states competing against each other in that cyber realm and cyber war. And sometimes we get caught in the crossfire.
Right.
That's part of it. The other thing, so let's see, I talked about our friends, the big game hunters, all that kind of fun stuff. One of the other things I would say is the big trends, I'll say, is so within the cyber industry, everybody is like, I may steal some of your thunder from some of the other stuff we're going to ask.
Yeah, you're good.
Is AI. Where does AI
so that
fit?
Here, I can kind of put this on a T for it.
Let's go with it.
So the next thing I was going to bring up is AI, because we're in a world now where 2 years ago, AI was barely part of the conversation. It didn't mean it wasn't happening. It just wasn't part of everyday conversation. But today, it's very much part of it, and to the point where everybody is using it. Now, at some point, there is a level where you have to go, this is really too good to be true. So I know that there has to be something else there. So when we talk about the AI and cybersecurity coming together, for better or worse, they're going to come together. So what are some ways that they're working together? What are some ways they're working against each other? And what can we be on the lookout for as the common user?
Yeah, so I would like to, I'll say, we'll back up and then we'll come back to the future. Okay.
Absolutely.
So first up, we had things like intrusion prevention systems and intrusion detection systems. We've had those for years, actually for a very long time. They're not AI, but they were detection models that were intended to be defensive. So what I will say is that in the cybersecurity industry, there's always been some version and movement towards automation. Okay. We just don't have enough people. I'll say if anybody reads any network traffic logs, I can tell you right now, it goes faster than a human being can actually digest it. So you have to have tools to be able to sift it and sort it and do it quickly. So those tools have been evolving for many, many years, right? Now, when you start to get into the realm of AI, part of the problem, part of the problem without AI is that the evolution of attacks and the shifts are starting to happen faster and faster, right? So what we're seeing on the bad guy side of the house, they're starting to use things like, hey, why can't I use an automated scanner? Why can't I use this? Why can't I do that? Why can't I start having things why can't I start writing AI that's going to actually try to assess and breach and get an initial breach? So as those different attacks and 0 days get utilized and all this fun stuff, you have to remember, like what I talked about with intrusion detection and prevention systems was they recognized existing known patterns. Okay. So when we start talking about AI on the defensive side, it's starting to recognize unknown patterns that may be breaches. Okay. So that is starting to happen now. There's different, I'll say I'm reluctant to name names because I don't want to pitch a particular company. There are companies out there. There's very good companies that are moving in this realm. Here's what I would say for the average business owner or user that's out there and says, hey, well, how do I try to approach this? So what I would say is, in essence, you can have, detection services by an outside vendor. Okay. And they can run software that does detections on your network for breaches, right? And depending upon that particular vendor, they have different versions of the evolution and training that's happened, right? My general comment would be one of the things I'll say, so I think I've shared this in a previous speech, so I want to say,
that's all right.
It's a news flash.
In the world of marketing, we like to pretend like nobody's seen it the last 100 times. Let's tell them again.
We'll tell them again. So the short version is, I think one of the problems that a lot of business owners, business leaders, and cyber leaders, they tend to focus on, well, if I'm in the healthcare industry, I want to watch what's happening in the healthcare sector for attacks, and I'm not saying that's wrong. You want to see that, but here's the problem with that model. I can tell you right now that there are different industries that get hit first.
So that's actually what I was just going to ask you, because now to make it to look at it that way, is there industries that tend to get attacked first? I would imagine they go after the big dollar ones. So I would imagine it's healthcare. I would imagine
finance,
arena.
Those industries are going to get hit first. And what you want is, if you're going to have a paid service that's going to do monitoring and detection and use AI to try to spot that, you want one where it's actually bringing in multiple industries into their model of detection and evaluation and training. Because what happens is if you see, so let's just say, okay, finance is usually one of the first. The closer you are to the money, the more your chances are you're going to get hit, right?
Right.
That's just the way it works. And so if they're starting to see new things first, they're going to probably see it first. And then aerospace or medical or automotive or somebody else may see it shortly thereafter. So when you're working with a vendor who's using AI that trains across multiple industries, as they start to evaluate and detect those early versions of that attack and flag it, once they start to successfully flag it, they propagate it out through their tools, and then the ability for them to find it is faster. All right, so that defensive response is quicker. Now, why is defensive response important? Okay. So how long do you think it takes for the average breach detection to occur?
I would love to say that it's less than 24 hours, but I feel like that's not accurate.
You would be correct.
All right. All right.
So the average, I'll say the last data that I've looked at, the average time to detection is 277 days.
Holy cow.
So if I breach you, how much of your stuff do you think I can take in 277 days?
So you're at 3/4 of a year.
Yeah.
And I have no idea that you've been in my system the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. You may not know that I'm even there.
Wow.
So it's that bad. 60% of small businesses collapse after their first cyber attack.
I would imagine.
Yeah, it's that bad.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk dollar values. The short version is there's a 60% probability as a small business that you're going to collapse from the event. So when you're looking at, okay, well, what do we need to look at? You need the ability to detect within 60 seconds, okay, understand the nature of that threat within 10 minutes, okay, well, wait, and respond within 60. Okay, so why does that work? That works because, well, it does for now. Right. It works because in general, like if you go out and look, I will give a plug out to groups like Verizon, in CrowdStrike. They publish breach reports. They do a lot of analysis on what are the trends. They get into a lot of details. In the 2023 breach report, the time frame on breach was, I believe, 83 minutes. Okay, so that 1-10-60 rule works. Now, that was the good news for 2022, or the 2023 report, which was actually 2022 data. It's a year behind because of the nature. They just released their 2024 report, which is a summary of 2023. So it has gone down each year. What do you think they went to from 83?
After the last one, I'm not even going to be close.
They went down. I think they went down 5 to 10. They went down about 5 minutes to get to 83. So where do you think they're at from year to year?
They dropped another 10.
They actually, so you're guessing probably around 73.
Yeah.
Yeah. They dropped to 64.
So they're speeding up faster than the systems can keep up with.
So our attackers are speeding up. One of the things that I've latched onto as I've been doing cross comparisons across those different breach reports from year to year is that I think there's been a lot of assumptions like, okay, they're using AI to breach us and all these things. And the short version is, that was the case a few years ago. Mm-hmm. That's changed.
Okay.
So as they start to compartmentalize and get their vendors within the bad guy groups, right? I think they're using AI to do scans and detections, and then I think once they find quote soft targets, what they do is they're actually bringing in interactive human-based attackers. So in essence, like that 422 class that I talked to you about. I like to call it, we teach people how to do digital jujitsu. Okay. So, it's, well, what the heck is that, Dave? That sounds kind of weird, but short version is you have to be able to, what happens if you're on your server and you figure out some remote attacker's literally on the machine with me right now.
Right. What do you do?
What do you do?
Right.
Well, we show you what to do.
Yeah. We
show you how to kick them off and lock them out, and then try to triage and figure out what damage did they inflict on you, if any. So the reason I bring that up is when you look at those breach reports, there is still a heavy trend that there is a human being from some remote location that's actually in your enterprise actively working. So if you actually figure out, holy cow, we've got a breach, wait a minute. Why do I got a remote connection out? Now, they usually try to hide it, but if you actually figure that out, well, what do I do?
Right.
What do I do? You can't panic. You got to do something.
Well, especially now, we know you only have a handful of minutes anyway.
Right. Yeah. Well, the other thing is, keep in mind, once they get that first breach done, okay, the one thing I like to talk about is they try to pivot to get more access. That's what they want. Like if you're an attacker, once you're in the enterprise, what you want to do is keep bouncing to get more access until you get what is known as the domain server. Right. Once you get the domain server, which in essence controls all the accounts for the entire enterprise, right? And then once you get there, you want a top level admin access on that domain. Right. Once you have that, I call that affectionately God access.
Right.
Because I can do anything at any time on any machine on the entire domain. All right. And then I can just delete logs. I can make myself disappear. And then I'm not using your account, because then if I'm using your account and I'm an attacker, if you try to log in, it's like, wait a minute, it says I'm already logged in. What the heck? So those types of, they can create their own special accounts. One of the other big, I'll say I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but one of the other big things is a lot of people are like, oh, I have cloud infrastructure, it doesn't matter. Well, sorry, pal.
Yeah.
The other side of the coin is all of these attackers are now starting to shift to cloud attacks. So if the assumption is, well, because I've migrated all my infrastructure to the cloud, I don't have to worry about, nope. It's happening. They're increasing the attacks on cloud infrastructure. I have multi-factor authentication. I don't have to worry about that. Wrong. They're faking it and phishing it, and they're figuring out how to get past it. So it's certainly not a simple game.
No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not. But I don't know that a lot of people think of it as an easy game, because I think that even the perspective of cybersecurity as a whole is that it is a very complicated thing. And I think because of that complication, I think people do look to degree level things. Whereas in business, a lot of times they may look past and go, I can handle this on my own. It's not really the case with cybersecurity, because a lot of times you have no idea what you don't know. And by having experts in the field and having industry experts in our classrooms teaching this every day and allowing that real hands-on experience, it really can't get much better. You can't get much closer to real life in a degree setting than you can right here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I really, really appreciate your time. I could sit here and talk about this stuff all day, as terrifying as it is. Yeah, I mean, and it is absolutely terrifying, but at the same time, it is reassuring to know that people like yourself and people like the faculty that we have here are teaching the next generation of those who will protect us and will be able to protect what is to come in the future. So thank you so much, and I look forward to our next conversation.
All right, thanks. Take care.
Thank you.